Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're thrilled to be welcoming you here today, joining us for this remarkable webinar on managing through financial anxiety. We're going to be beginning momentarily, but before we do, again, it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. My name is Nicola Corzine. I'm the founding executive director of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. Now, for those of you who may be joining us for the first time today, we're delighted to have you as part of our community. The center is a nonprofit really committed to helping entrepreneurs achieve their ambitious goals and through all challenges that they may be facing. Before we get started, just a quick suggestion for how to offer through. For the best user experience today, we do suggest clicking your view into gallery view. And just as a reminder, we are going to be opening up for Q&A at the end of the panel. So please include your questions in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to try to get to just as many questions as we can. And of course, none of this offering for the center would be possible without the remarkable work of our sponsors and their generous support. All of them believe emphatically in the power of entrepreneurship and innovation. They make their generous donations available to us in support of entrepreneurs changing the world for the better. And with them, we are truly grateful and humbled to be part of their system. Now, a couple of polls that I'd like to get started with before we launch into today's amazing webinar. Since the beginning of this pandemic, we have been mindful to understand the challenging times that our entrepreneurs and business owners are facing. And so to that end, we're actually asking you to reply today to share how you're actually feeling in this current time. One of the mechanisms that we want to understand is really your survivability, your feelings around the challenges that you're going through, and honestly, the sentiment that is being experienced. We're going to give this just a moment. Interestingly and somewhat not surprisingly, the last couple of polls have received the same kind of engagement. Almost half of people right now are feeling somewhat anxious in these times. And our job is to say that you're not alone in this. It's completely understandable. And we want to try to make available resources and support for you in this very challenging time. Let me go ahead and share that poll before I launch into the second one. The next thing that we know is that many of you joining on this call are obviously existing business owners, and many of you may be aspiring entrepreneurs trying to bring your ideas to life in this time. And so what I'd like to do now is open up our second poll, just inviting you to share what kind of entrepreneur, what type of entrepreneur are you? Are you an aspiring? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a big supporter within the ecosystem at large? So if I can invite people to please reply to that poll that should be up in front of you right now, that will help us in just better understanding who our community is and who our entrepreneurs are right now. Let me relaunch that one. Perfect. We'll give that just a moment or two. Excellent. We've got a beautiful blend panelists today, just so you know, of entrepreneurs and other supporters within the ecosystem. So that is great to see. And we really appreciate those around us joining today in all walks of life. Now, our last poll that I'm going to launch, and then I promise we're going to get started with this webinar, is really around understanding what your greatest business challenge is in this time. Just so you know, we use this information not only as moments of understanding the challenges that you're going through, but also to inform and guide us on what programs and educational offerings we actually bring to life. So this poll is going to help us better be informed on what it is that we should be producing for you in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So if you could please share with us right now, what is your top business challenge? And we promise you, we will let you see these upcoming programs that are responding to these challenges. Finance and sales continue to be the two top drivers, not surprisingly. Great. So let me go ahead and share the results with our community so that you can see how you're not alone in the challenges that you're facing. Okay, now without any further ado, it is truly my great honor and opportunity to invite this amazing panel here today to walk us through and hopefully talk us back a little bit from the edge that we're all feeling right now around financial anxiety in this pandemic. So please join me in welcoming Edward Webb, who in turn will be introducing our remarkable panel. Edward, over to you.
Thanks, Nicola. Good morning, everybody. I'm Edward Webb. I'm a partner in the advisory services group at BPM. And before I ask my fellow folks on the panel to introduce themselves, let me thank the team at NASDAQ for having us here. NASDAQ, they've been very good friends of BPM, and we've had a great working relationship over the years. And it's really nice to be here. We have a great program in store, but let me let my colleagues introduce themselves. So Brett, if you would.
Thanks, Edward. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening to those listening not in the Bay Area or California. My name is Brett Hazlett. I'm a director in the advisory practice at BPM. Recently joined and have been focused on interpreting the CARES Act and specifically some of the loan programs in that. But most recently, prior to BPM, I was the CFO for a small startup in the micro mobility space. So have a deep appreciation for the challenges that you guys are dealing with right now. So look forward to speaking with you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Pappenheimer, and I lead the HR consulting practice within BPM. And we support startups, small businesses to large entities. I've been in HR for over 30 years, I hate to admit, and have seen and done it all. We love supporting individuals and organizations that are really trying to do what's best for their people and engage their people in a way that's powerful. We help from the very startup stage, from building infrastructures and advising on best way forward to getting into some complex employee relations issues. But it's really about how can you engage people that can be really powerful is what we like to really help support organizations in understanding and how to approach that. So I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Hill, and thanks again to NASDAQ for allowing us to be part of this hour and a half. I am a partner in the advisory group at the firm, and I have responsibility for our CFO practice. So we will work with entrepreneurs, with the investors and folks around them, private equity, venture capital, and others to, and we'll get a little bit deeper into this, but to really help folks tell their story and to understand where the levers in the business are available to push and pull. And I have to say, I'm extremely delighted to see how much optimism there was blended with the anxiety. If you look me up, it's difficult to accuse me of being a CPA. I'm a recovering entrepreneur myself, so spent 15 years doing that. I owned a business and then I ran someone else's company. So hoping to have a great conversation.
Great. Thanks, guys. Just to give you some general information, BPM is a top 50 accounting and consulting firm. We're headquartered here in the Bay Area, and this is where our primary group of folks work out of. We have a West Coast presence, office in Seattle, offices down in Orange County and in the Central Valley. We have an office in India. And so that's us. To get us started, I would like to give you another poll question. We're going to have a few throughout our presentation, and it helps us get a sense of where you guys are, and also allows us to share some information about where we've been, and maybe we can talk a little bit about where we're going here. So we'll give you 20 or 30 seconds here to answer this one. Excellent. So we're looking at 80% plus or minus that have been impacted significantly by COVID-19 and the SIP. This is very consistent with what we've seen in the past. Our expectation is that the impact is going to be continuing to be felt for quite some time. What that impact means may evolve a little bit. And so if I could get the next slide, please. So today, to get us started, I want to introduce the way that we are looking at the current situation. We have been deeply involved at BPM, working with clients on the stimulus programs that have been available. Literally dozens of clients have made application for PPP, or they have made application for the Main Street programs. And that immediate term liquidity has been provided, and in some cases has had an enormous impact and has allowed businesses to stay open, which is great. And that was its purpose. And as we approach now, what is the end of the 8-week period for the disbursement of cash, and then in order to qualify for forgiveness, we're approaching the next phase. And we're terming this the operating profitability phase. In other words, are your businesses, given the circumstances and likely reduced volumes, and I know many of you were concerned about sales in the previous poll question, are you able to operate profitably, and what do you have to do to ensure it? We're going to be talking about people strategies. Jill is going to be handling that. Clearly, this is a people first issue. And so how we deal with our staff, how we deal with the financial implications of staffing are vital. And then that's going to lead us to what we feel is the broader question. And this is the part that may take us months and then years as we work out of this circumstance. And that is my business model viable? Am I going to have to be doing business a different way? Are my products viable? And how do I anticipate that? How do I plan for that? How do I communicate that to lenders and potential investors? How do I position myself to be successful a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years down the line? So this morning, we're going to get a quick recap from Brett on the current state of things regarding the stimulus programs and what's coming down in terms of guidance from the government. And then we're going to jump right into the people section. So Brett, if you would.
Thanks, Edward. Yeah, as Edward was saying there, planning agility is really going to be critical. And so understanding, what's happening, news, real time, how are your employees feeling, which Jill will touch on, what are consumers doing, those types of things, how you incorporate that data. Is there a new outbreak in a region that either you have employees or that you sell products? How do you capture that information and build it into your processes is critical. So one of that is, how do you stay ahead of information? So, one way is by, listening in on things like this webinar. And so just wanted to give you guys sort of the latest thinking on some of the short-term liquidity issues that Edward talked about. So, for those that have gotten PPP loans, obviously there's been a lot of concern around utilization of those and those types of things. So the House and the Senate are evaluating bills to lengthen those time periods. That's one of the things that's going on. This morning, the House, in terms of real-time news and how you incorporate that, the House passed their bill this morning, which would do a few things. So it would extend the 8-week term to 24 weeks. It would lower the 75% minimum on payroll to 60%. And it would extend the payback period from 2 years to 5 years. So all very business friendly terms. And that bill passed 417 to 1. So about as bipartisan as you'll ever get a bill. So that'll get kicked over to the Senate, who's out of session this week, but will be back in next week. With that level of bipartisanship, you can expect that likely something will go through. Nothing in DC is done until it's done. But we can assume that there will probably continue to be changes to the program. So how do you incorporate that information? How are you learning? How are you using that to inform your decision making with those funds? Really critical. The second point on here, the Main Street Lending Program. So sort of the other big program for small and medium-sized businesses that was a part of the CARES Act. They really worked to do a much better job of rolling this program out, which has meant that it's taken longer than the PPP program. Just last week, the Fed chairman indicated that they would be up and running by the end of this week or at the latest sometime next week. So, we're still getting sort of real time here, but they continue to evolve this program, changing the loan sizes and who can qualify. So again, how do you incorporate that information? If you still need liquidity, do you fit in there? Do you not? Staying on top of those types of things will be really critical. Stimulus round 4. What else is out there? Might there be things coming? Again, this is obviously much more of just a question about what might be coming. But obviously, there's talk out there. So the House has proposed a bill. It wouldn't really touch businesses as much. It would, extend payments to individuals again, like in the first round. It would do state and municipal funding, which will be critical to keeping employment levels high and schools funded and police and fire departments funded, those types of things. So really critical, but not as much for business, at least as defined now. Compare that to Europe, where wage subsidies have been sort of the norm. And, might there be some thinking there as this evolves and we hear new information? Possibly. Again, it'll be interesting to see how Europe comes out of this with a much different approach than the US took. Europe just this week also, has sort of a second stimulus of 750 billion euros that is really linked to Green Deal initiatives, so climate change impact. So would there be hooks in these things around the world, and how does that work? And then ultimately that leads to, if it's not stimulus, what are other options that are available to you? And I won't go through these. These are more of a teaser for Terry, but once you move beyond sort of this short term, you need to think about what else is out there. So things like asset-based lending, mezzanine funding, and other debt. Terry will get into those in a bit more detail, but that's sort of the thought is, how do you incorporate the most current information? And then once those levers are pulled, how do you move on to sort of the next layer of things?
Great. Thanks, Brett. And if we could, let's go to the next slide, Maggie, because new poll question. And let's put that up there, if you would. All right, looks like we've stabilized at about a little under 60% have applied, and little more than half have received funds. So the information that you passed on that passed the House today, Brett, is important. Now having a 24-week period to disperse those funds and take advantage of the forgiveness. So let's shift gears a little bit. It would be good to talk about the people side of this, Jill, and you can give folks a sense of what going back to work may mean for them, and what the issues that they're going to face are.
Yeah, thanks, Edward. So, when we advise organizations and how to manage people during this period, it's really so unique in terms of honoring people first. And so I want to start there. So if we can move to the next slide. The first component here is supporting people. So how do we do that? How do we honor people? How do we support people? Well, we know that people are dealing with a lot of emotion. I was on a call yesterday, a Zoom call, and just looking at the audience and people on the screen, at least half that you're looking at are dealing with something pretty intense behind the scenes that you do not know about. And so you just have to go through with an assumption that people are dealing with a lot, and we have to support people like we've never done that in the past from a business perspective. And so I think that line between the personal and the business gets a little more muddied during this period, and maybe ongoing from here on. It may be an interesting shift for us, but very important to honor that people are dealing with a lot, and how can you support people? So in terms of dealing with, if you have employees in an office and people are starting to go back to work, how do you deal with supporting that environment where maybe you have remote workers, maybe you have people in an office? How to approach that during this period? One component that I strongly advise is preparation. And to be proactive, set yourself up for being proactive versus reactive. For example, if there is an illness that occurs in the office. So be prepared with the site plan. Now, this is mandated, but it's also so key for you to go through the process of just thinking through, what do we need to do? How do we need to prepare an office for people returning to work? From just a physical standpoint, as well as from the people standpoint. And so you want to think about safety, you want to think about creating schedules where people are not going to be congregating in certain rooms or in working together, too many people at a time. So preparing for that, what do you do if somebody gets sick? What do you do about taking people's temperatures? Is that okay? It absolutely is okay. And we do encourage that the taking of temperature is something that just is supported. It never would be supported in the past, but it is key at this time. You want to make sure that you're not allowing people who are sick to be in an office with other people. So, and I'll expand on that in a little bit, but one thing I want to touch on with the redesign of the office space, this second bullet here under strategies, that I encourage people to think out of the box with knowing that you need social distancing in the office. And that is key. And how do you best do that? But it's also an interesting time to think about how to set up your environment in this new norm in a way where people can collaborate, feel safe, and still have privacy. So I think many years back, we were avoiding we were in the office, right? And not doing as much collaboration. And then we moved to a very collaborative kind of workspace, and that became the norm. we're creating a new norm here with how do we design our office space. So one that respects people's privacy, gives people the ability to be addressing the concern of being too close to somebody they think might have symptoms, and there's the fear there. So I encourage you to just consider all of those components when configuring your office for people to go back into this space. So what do you do if somebody doesn't want to return to the office? If you have employees and somebody doesn't return, what are your rights as an employer? How is the best way to handle that? So honoring people, again, is always what we promote, and hear them out, hear their concerns, address their concerns, do active listening. If there's a way they can work from home and continue to do that, try to honor that. If you actually need them in the office space and they're essential to your business, then that's okay too. And you can mandate that you have to have them back. And if they're not comfortable, then you have the option of not bringing them back. So as a small business, that weighing of what you need to do for your business is of key importance. But if there's ways to accommodate, you certainly want to do that. What if someone tests positive in your work environment? What do you do then? So if you have somebody who has tested positive, you want to obviously send them home right away. There is this interesting component of what do I do now from a business perspective, because people are feeling exposed and maybe everybody needs to go home. Once you've just established that someone's sick, you might want to send everyone home. That's probably recommended, and do extensive cleaning in your office. Maybe give people a period of time to be out of the office. So there's a lot of strategies here. You do want to request a medical note before allowing someone back in the office if they've been exposed. So getting into regular temperature checking is absolutely okay. You may even want a third party to be involved in doing that with your employees. So making people feel safe in the office is key. Doing regular checking of temperature. If someone is sick, sending them home, making sure everyone is aware that someone has gotten sick is key. So that transparency is key. You want to be creating an environment where people trust that you're doing everything you can within the office environment. So moving on, accommodate people as much as you can. If they're under ADA and they have a disability of some kind, then you've got to follow those ADA requirements. Workers' comp is key here, so we may be seeing more workers' comp claims come up in the future, and just be aware of that. There are some restrictions around mod rates going up so that the cost factor becomes prohibitive. So stay tuned for regulations around workers' comp and more information there. And then EAP, for those of you who haven't heard of EAP, is Employee Assistance Program. This is an opportunity for employees to talk to someone regarding healthcare, mental health, and get advice, and have a therapist online that they can talk to in times of true anxiety. This is a key added benefit that if you're offering employee insurance, you want to add this component to make sure that people have an opportunity to have someone to talk to. So look into that with whoever's providing healthcare to your organization. And then finally in this last section here, I'd like to talk a little bit about becoming an agile business. And we've talked about this a little bit from a introductory standpoint on the agility component, being able to deal with change, and setting your organization up so that change occurs and you can respond appropriately and be resilient, and being able to bounce back. And I would argue that to do that, you want to set up your culture where employees' work is one where you can adjust people's responsibilities and the outcomes that they produce as a way to then support that kind of ongoing change that may need to happen in your organization. So I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slide. But the first bullet here is about all management is good management. What I refer to there is from a remote work standpoint, as well as in the office. So whether you're managing people face-to-face or remotely, good management can happen in either of those scenarios. And good management usually means being a good coach, supporting your employees through coaching them rather than micromanaging them. And so how do you do that? Well, there are ways to do that in a way where you can be assured the work is getting done and you can hold them accountable and support people getting work done that is more focused on performance and the outcome versus what they're doing day to day. We've seen many clients that get in this mode of management and micromanaging that can become stifling, and it doesn't work for the manager and it doesn't work for employees. Employees need to be empowered to get the work done in a way that fits their style. So really encouraging that kind of connected ability to move as the business needs shift with the employee base. And let me talk about this a little bit more in the next slide. How am I doing on time?
I'm going to ask you a question before you jump to the next slide.
Okay.
And the question is, does it make better sense to reduce a whole group of people's hours by a certain percent? So you've got a group of 5 employees and you cut them to 80%, or is it better to cut one individual entirely and allow the 4 remaining to pick up the burden? What are you seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Edward. And you know, there's so many options on how to structure an organization with juggling people and how to juggle if you need to do cutbacks. You've got the option of furloughing, reducing time, as Edward's speaking of, laying off. You know, it's really not a slam dunk kind of response, unfortunately. It's going to be very unique to the business and the business needs. And it's also, I would recommend some collaboration with employees to see what's going to work. We've seen many organizations survey employees and give them 3 or 4 options and then go with the majority. You can also juggle the unemployment, which has come up for many organizations because unemployment is gone up by $600 a week. So in some cases, it's more advantageous for an employee to be out on unemployment. And so there's that balance of the reduction in hours plus the unemployment, or even just laying off for a period of time. So there's no definitive there.
So Jill, you know, some of the folks here in this group are just getting started, and to be honest with you, I feel this way myself sometimes. As you're facing these issues, I'm almost afraid to talk to my employees because I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't want to get in trouble. And, you know, I know what's going on with the business, but how do I communicate that and do it safely?
So that's awesome. And that's a great lead into this next slide for me as well. So let me just address that more specifically. Employees want to be heard. They want to be honored. They want to be able to provide feedback, be part of the conversation. So as much as you can involve people, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, I encourage that to happen. Ask questions, understand what is going on for that individual at any one time. So keeping that open dialogue is key. And I would carry that through and apply it to this slide here, because really the most ideal environment and one where you can really build culture if you're a startup from day one, is to have this collaborative, sort of transparent organization where everyone can see the work that's getting done within the organization. Not necessarily how they're doing it, but the work that's getting done. And you can share the accomplishments and recognize people through that transparency. So the opportunity to create a cohesive team, to engage people so they feel part of your objective as an organization and your small business from day one is going to be a key differentiator for you during this time of anxiety and businesses going out of business, going out of business, to really set yourself up as an employer of choice, because you're honoring people, you're allowing them to participate in the setting of their own responsibilities and goals, and allowed to actually participate in what needs to happen within your organization. So the more collaboration and the more engagement that you can create in your structure from day one, the more powerful and engaged people will be throughout your life period.
Good.
Your organization.
Good. And I have another couple questions that I've got for you. But before we do that, I think we have a quick poll question, and then we got to hear from Terry Hill. Okay, so do you believe the stimulus funds you received are sufficient? Interesting. This is really an interesting response. I think, cool, we're good there. You can lock it down. There's kind of a follow-up question, which might be sufficient for what? And that's the question that I think Terry's going to be taking on in his talk. So Terry, take it away.
Thanks, Edward. And let's go to the next slide. I think that's mine. Oh, I lied. 2 slides. All right. So a couple things. I'm going to editorialize really quickly. I want to let everyone know on the webinar. I mean, we feel you. This is it was interesting to watch the one of the first 2 polls where the overwhelming response was a mix of anxiety and optimism. And I will tell you, everyone at BPM feels the same, right? We're anxious because things have changed. Their plane's being built while we fly it, and the runway is moving. But we're extremely juiced because we're watching customers surprise us, surprise themselves. People are adapting. We've got early stage companies changing their thesis a bit. So feel you and hear you, and I'm really delighted to be talking about this stuff. So I think a couple of themes that we've been tracking, and the last poll was interesting because it highlights really that the PPP was and is a short-term sort of liquidity people solution. It is not something that solves the bigger problem, right? It was a needed bit of relief. And I think that one of the things we are encouraging folks is to have double vision, right? So really understand that you've got some near-term mechanics of acquiring this liquidity relief, making sure you can use the money to good use to keep your people and or have a low cost of capital. But really, truly, like, what is the market telling you? And interestingly, I think one of the sources of anxiety is that everyone's experience is different, right? We've got clients and we have lots of folks that are just starting up, emerging clients, maybe a little bit more mature, but still in the growth phase. And their investors, we talk with their advisors, and everyone's experience is different, right? Obviously, folks that are in the the cloud and collaboration, connectivity, and mobility sectors are doing well, right? Because that whole paradigm has been amplified. However, some section of that group has a sector concentration. So if you are a connectivity platform that has a concentration in hospitality, perhaps it's a different story. Same thing for consumer and food companies, right? A little up and down. Same thing for fintech. So if you're a fintech company, I think there's probably lots of opportunity in what's going to be a changing consumer spending habit form, but perhaps warehouse lines will look different and cost of capital will look different for you. So I think that stay close to your advisors, stay close to your board if you have one. Stay really close to your customers and vendors, right? I think having, to Brett's point earlier, having real-time connectivity and awareness to what the market is telling you, and being courageous enough to face that and understand what it means is critical. So there's a couple of things that we'll drill into. One, many of you are going to have additional working capital needs, right? If you've been the beneficiary or you've been stable through COVID, perhaps they're less, but certainly we've seen companies who actually have an opposite sort of counterintuitive problem, which is they've been a hell of a beneficiary and they've had month over month increases of 200%. And so they have the other kind of working capital needs. All are important. And it's going to be important to both inside the business for yourself and for the folks around you, and for the external constituents that may aid you in that working capital to tell your story. So for those who have a sort of top-down addressable market forecast and pipeline strategy, it may be time to put a little more color around that so you can communicate with both your people and the folks that may help you with the working capital. Secondly, understand where you are in your burn and runway. If you had 9 months and that has now turned into 3 months, obviously extremely important to talk to your existing equity partners if you have them. If you are friends and family, obviously important to understand how much time you have, and with the feedback of the market and your customers, what does that look like, right? And if you don't have the whole picture, half of the participants in the poll said they weren't sure, right? And to Edward's point, what's sufficient for what? You maybe get some outside help to really model out in a simple way what is your runway. One of the other things that has been disparate and sort of follows the theme of people's experience being very, very different is the banks, right? So almost everyone on the line will have one or more existing relationships with banks, right? Borrower, you've got accounts for deposits. Staying very, very close to your bank is going to be extremely important in the next 90 days. The bank's regulators have not forced them yet to downgrade their portfolio. And what that means really is for companies that would otherwise be seen as in distress or trending towards distress, the banks would normally change their outlook on that internally, and that would affect their behavior with you. So stay close to what that means. I'm also learning from talking to banks directly that relationship managers don't always have the full picture, partly because of the regulatory easing. So if you have the ability, perhaps get on a call with your RM as well as someone else like in credit, just to understand the broader picture and I would be very, very sort of proactive in your communication. Hey, I want to understand, as I look at my runway, what does the summer look like for me and my bank? Don't take the first answer you get because it may not always be reliable. Other thing I'll mention really quickly is that for some of us, if there is long-term viability, right, and this is going to come from doing a honest analysis of what the market's telling us and telling your story internally and externally. If you have long-term business viability, but you have a shorter-term problem, and that is your runway is going to expire, your current equity partners aren't quite ready to do a follow-on, and that next round may be a little bit further out. There are other ways to keep going, right? And they are more expensive, of course, but if there's a analysis of the cost of capital and what the runway looks like and what this looks like on the other side for your emergence, right? Again, this is listening to the market and having a thesis for it. There is non-bank debt that can be quite compelling as a bridge financing mechanism to get you through a period. There are private debt funds that specialize in mezzanine that can look like growth financing. And these are kind of 8, 10, 12, 15% loans as a general rule. And then there are some other things that are a little more targeted, depending on what you're trying to solve for. And this is why telling your story, at least to start with internally, is so critical. You're going to need to solve for various problems, right? If you are looking for purchase order financing, right, because you've got clients ready, but your supplier needs some money up front, that's going to look different than hiring 3 sales and marketing folks to get the word out on your new product that is now commercialized. So everyone's story will be a little different, and you're going to solve for different problems in different ways. But there are solutions out there that may be additional to your current partner group. I will also mention really quick, there's also some predatorial behavior. I've seen lots of emails go around. Please be careful about, merchant account advances. Those are a little tricky. And there are some other things. So again, stay close to your advisors who may have experience with the perils of some of the alternative forms of financing.
So Terry, a question has come through. It's really a you and Brett type question, I think. And that is, you've mentioned tell your story a couple of times. And so how do you do that? Sometimes entrepreneurs are really good at whatever it is that they do. Maybe they're engineers, for example, but how do they tell a financial story if that's going to be so important to lenders and other sources of capital?
Yeah, great question. And I'll go first, Brett. Maybe I'm sure I'll miss something. So valuable to hear your side of this as well. So, look, depending on where folks are in their trajectory, whether they're the aspiring or new entrepreneur or a little bit later stage, the story will be different. Thematically, though, all of us in one way or another struggle to leverage ourselves. We don't have the peoples, the systems, the processes to adequately leverage information out of the company. And when it comes to telling your story for financing, that has to do with going a little bit deeper than just a forecast for the addressable market. So maybe a more bottoms up pipeline, product throughput, inventory, things like that. It has to do with maybe going across functions and understanding. I was with a client recently and we looked at their Salesforce.com. They had four salespeople that were all almost 100% commission, so kind of variable cost-ish. And it was funny. Everyone's pipeline was going to close in the next 3 weeks, which at that time happened to be the end of a quarter, right? So there are, as people begin to look into the business, there are some low-hanging fruit items that once inspected are quite easy to get after. In this case, we changed a little bit of the behavior from the sales team to properly evidence what the sales funnel really was. And for them, this became critical for external financing. So this really is all about, Edward, at the very least, helping yourself if you can, if you have the skills, getting some outside help to put a finer picture on the financial outlook of the company based on market information, feedback from customers, really credible information about your sales pipeline and about if you have inventory levels or the throughput of people or the time to turn around a software or loan package if you're fintech, that is ready and credible for external constituents who are very, very sophisticated themselves and need to see a clearly painted picture.
Good. Brett, you got something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add, and I think Terry and I have both hit on it, right? Everybody, when you're an entrepreneur, you've got a thesis on sort of how you're going to attack the market and what, niche you're going to play in or how you're going to attack a competitor. I think as equally important in this time will be, what's your thesis on how that is changing as well, right? So how are you showing people that you're thinking about what consumer behaviors are going to do in the future and how that, how you're going to play into that. So I think having a viewpoint on, where the market is headed for your product or service is really critical and how it's different, right? To show folks that you're you're understanding the moment, you're thinking about what's going to change, because that's going to be on their mind, right? Is, can you remain viable? You know, how are you addressing that? So really being specific on that, you know, to Terry's point, digging in deep on the financials behind that, but being really clear on, you know, this is what we're seeing. This is the data we're incorporating. This is why we think this is going to happen, and how we're going to be able to benefit from it, or change our strategy to take advantage of it will be critical.
Yeah, Edward, the last thing I'll add to that is for a lot of the folks on the phone who are using good SEO, Google AdWords, Google Analytics, you know, some of that root level data being synthesized in a really easy to understand way is valuable and credible.
Guys, is there a number? Is there an amount of cash which people need to have? You know, is it 24 months? Is it 12 months? Is it 3 months? What's the magic number?
I may be wealthier than I am today if I knew that exactly. I think that, look, I think that we can all expect that the year 2020 will look very different. And so having, in my way of thinking, at least, look, everyone's going to have a different experience. If you are indeed still running your business and you have customers signing up and your funnel is good, that's a different set of problems. But for others who are going to have an interruption which is an otherwise viable business plan, I think 9 months to get through the summer months, understand where the bank is going to be for you or not, and then get through the first quarter and execute on some form of either alternative financing package or a follow-on round is going to be key. So 6 months gets you through to the year end. If investors and other folks are active again, 90 days gives you time to execute and transact on some sort of follow-on cash flow.
Brett, you got anything you want to add to that? Or you on board?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, it's obviously, to Terry's point, really difficult to nail that, and particularly for startups, right? Everybody's going to be in a different stage of where they're at. But really, it gets back to Terry's point at the beginning of understanding your runway, right? What do you have right now? How far does it get you? You really need to, you know, to Terry's point there, extend out as far as you possibly can, you know, to see things loosen up on the investor side. And so, you know, if that's, you know, making some decisions to, you know, lower costs, you know, if there are ways to accelerate revenue, you know, working capital adjustments, whatever those are, you know, trying to extend it to the max possible to get you to a loosened up period is critical.
You know, I'm a little bit more bearish than you two guys. And I'm thinking that this relates to how long it's going to take for us to return to the type of performance that we were used to pre-virus. And I believe 12 to 18 months minimum is necessary. And that really is kind of the lead into what is going to end up being the final question for each of you guys. And I need a quick and snappy response to, you know, if you've got a model in place that shows you with a certain level of performance, and we know that it's been absolutely impacted by this coronavirus, how do we adjust? Do we do a sensitivity analysis? Do we do a new model? Are we looking at 3 months? Are we looking at 9 months? Are we looking at 12 months? Guys, that's a nasty question, but I want your best shot. And let's start with Jill, because she's going to give us the people perspective.
Yeah, so the people perspective for thinking out. I mean, you know, as I was talking about earlier, the ability to be agile is so key. And that is to be able to shift quickly as priorities change. And to do that, you need to get your whole team on board with you and use that brain power of your entire team to talk about your business and what you project that future period is going to look like. And collaborate and work together and recognize that what is today may not be tomorrow.
Okay, good. Brett?
Yeah, I think, as I think about that, you're really looking at multiple views, right? So there is no one perfect answer. So it's short term, what do I need? How do I get through today and tomorrow? Am I meeting my loan covenants? Those types of things that Terry talked about. How am I dealing with my people, to Jill's point? And am I able to pay those folks and keep them happy and engaged so that I can drive the business? And then, you need a mid and long-term view as well. So to me, Edward, it's not one or the other. It's, really keeping different people in the business engaged on different things. So it may be a once a week check-in on the day to day, and it may be once every 2 weeks or once every month view on mid to long term. It's you sort of have to do both in parallel.
Cool. I'm going to be coming back to you in a minute, Brett, during the Q&A section, but Terry, you got about a minute and a half to give us your wisdom.
Cool. That's all I need. A couple things. One, do something now, right? So have a plan. Your plan is going to probably follow the rule of thirds. A third of it will be antiquated the day you write it. A third of it will be pretty darn good down the middle. And a third of it will be revolutionary and may really affect positive change. But having a plan is going to help you and your teams go together in the same direction. It's going to help you tell your story, right? Alongside the financial analysis piece we've been talking about. So do that right away. Number two, really, truly, please know that there are, if you can tell your story and evidence yourself to the market, which is the people you know now, and then some of the alternative forms of financing that are on the slide. We didn't get to the private equity family offices section, but there are options. If you have a viable business and have a 12 to 24 month ripple and an otherwise viable business that has staying power, you have options. That may be a down round, but you have options. And if you are ready to consume those options, they're out there. It's a historic time for private equity. It's a historic time for family office direct investing into companies alongside the other alternative forms of debt. So do something, do it right away, get some outside help if you need it, and know you have lots of options.
Excellent. So Jill, we've been asked if there are some concrete examples of how we might help team members feel seen and valued during this critical time. What are things that leaders can do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Couple things come to mind. So have Zoom meetings and give opportunities for that visual connectedness if you're not in the office. If you have people in the office and remote, you still want to have Zoom meetings so everybody can participate. Allow people to be seen visually. Now, I would also encourage considering a tool that could be used as a strategic performance tool that will tie the work that people are doing with the strategy of your business and allow you to create transparency through a visual tool that connects people. So you may be on Slack or some kind of collaborative tool. I would also encourage a performance type tool where, to what Brett was talking about earlier, you're meeting weekly maybe about day-to-day work and acknowledging and course correcting, but maybe on a monthly basis, you're having conversations about the bigger picture and the work that's being done that is critical to the role of the individual, and allowing them to be heard, give feedback, and participate in those performance type conversations. And so I would encourage, this is a great time, even in startup mode, to create that kind of environment where people participate from day one and get performance feedback, and managers and employees are talking to each other regularly.
I'll add to what you just said there, Jill. Something that I've done with my groups is that I have included staff in leadership meetings as we have talked about specific engagements. So they're feeling like they are more actively involved with how we're managing projects. It's easy to do. It definitely helps them understand where the business is and what the points of pressure are. And people have appreciated it. It really is the little things like that. The other thing to help somebody feel seen, ask them how their kids are. Remember the name of their spouse, and ask how they're doing. Those little things really do matter.
And I'll add to that, maybe have a Zoom meeting where people can shine on their own personal creativity, or maybe they have a talent, and allow people to showcase that.
Wow, that could be scary. Hey, there was a question that came regarding scenario planning and sensitivity analyses. Brett, how do you do it? Not everybody went to Purdue to get their MBA, and so they may not know how. Just give us a quick thumbnail on how that's done.
Yeah, and obviously, there are varying degrees, Edward, that you can do that at, right? So some simple things that, if you don't have a deep bench of experience yourself, or a team that can do it, right? I mean, there are simple things of, 10, 30% reductions, right? Like, what does that do? And does that mean you need to start thinking about, other decision-making if those numbers don't keep you, in a strong cash position? So there you can sort of start from those simple things of just up and down certain percentages. That's sort of the baseline of where everybody starts on this. From there, you get to varying degrees of, complexity that you can build into it. So you can build in economic models that account for what might happen in the economy. You can build in additional pieces where you can make decisions. So if we lay off employees, if we get a new customer contract, things like that, sort of yes or no toggles are a way to do it. And after that, then you get into some of the more complex things where you can really layer on tools like Crystal Ball and other things that do Monte Carlo simulations and really give you a detailed analysis. And most people will need sort of a partner to do that. But for me, it's really, scenario planning is really thinking about those critical business levers. And even if you don't know precisely what they're going to be, just giving yourself some options of, hey, what happens if it changes by 10%, or it changes by 25%, or it changes by 50%? That's really the thing, is to zero in on the critical business drivers and to build some thoughts around that.
Good. And I'm going to put in a little plug. I just finished an article yesterday for an accounting magazine on sensitivity analyses and cash flow forecasting. So if you want to see an early copy, send me an email and I'll be happy to send it to you. Terry Hill, the question comes, how do you lower cost and accelerate revenues? That's a tall order. How do you do it?
Yeah, I saw that question too. It's a good one. So a couple of thoughts, and I'll just be general because everyone's experience is different, as we've sort of broken recorded. Revenue is tough for us to comment on because that's a bit of the market piece. But what we can talk about is cash as a function of revenue. So there are things you can do to affect that, right? So if you have any lax or informality or poor accountability in your billing practices or how you do cash conversion, right, from the intent of a customer to buy something to when you get paid, you have to shortcut all of those roads. So if you have bill.com, make it work properly. If you have people that are running bill.com but not doing it properly, fix that immediately. If you have customers that want to change payment terms on you, go negotiate with them, right? Don't accept, net 60, maybe accept net 20 with a discount, right? Because money in hand is worth more than waiting for 60 days. So there are things you can do to your cash conversion cycle, which may be at the heart of the question. Hard to talk about revenue. That's largely what the entrepreneur does, but you got to get your cash conversion cycle working. If you are, if you're the one doing collections, make time for it, even if it's 2 a.m. If you have people doing collections, make sure they're really focused on what matters. I met with a client recently that had an oversimplified AR aging tool that showed aging but didn't have enough detail to notice when someone had skipped an invoice. So they saw that there was a recent invoice and an aged invoice, but there was actually one that lived in the middle that they didn't really have visibility to. And in that case, the client hadn't received it or said they hadn't. So a simple retransmittal got the cash in the door, but it wasn't until we poked around at that. The cost side is going to be different for everyone, but I think the theme is cut absolutely all of the fat you can. You might need to cut a tiny bit into the muscle, but don't cut so much that you don't have an accelerant, to the recovery once there is a possible emergence, right? So that's people, that's systems. If you have, recurring licenses for things that you don't use daily, shut those down. There are, this is not a P&L item, but there are lots of tools out there with, for kind of forgivenesses and deferrals of taxes, payroll and otherwise, and landlords may work with you. So find every way possible to maximize liquidity, which is going to help you continue to buy time to work through what this emergence really looks like for you. And in the meantime, you got to get your cash conversion cycle to work. Give people discounts if they want to give you extended terms. And then I think that's probably it, Edward.
Okay.
Those
Good.
are concrete enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just jump in quickly. I mean, I think, with this group being, an entrepreneurially focused group, I mean, on the revenue side, I would just add, use the tools that you guys are best at, right? So be action oriented, do testing, right? How do you don't get stuck in analysis, test, learn, adapt, right? Go try to get as much information quickly as you can. And then, on Jill's side, just, how do you enable people, right? Like, how do you really take advantage of your people now that are close to what's going on and incorporate that information? Again, those aren't specific revenue. To Terry's point, you can't do that for a business, but, in terms of like the broad concepts of how do you get information, learn and enact it quickly, that's where, this group is probably really great at those things. So, doubling down on those things and making sure that you're taking advantage of what you're already good at can really help you sort of stay ahead of the curve.
I'll follow up what you guys are saying with, if you identify your objectives in terms of reducing expenses and increasing revenues, and you share that with people, you may be presenting what appears to be an impossible objective. That is perfectly okay to do. You are going to find people in your organizations who will respond very favorably to what's going on in this crisis. There will be other people who have a much harder time of it. And that's neither bad nor good. But when you are able to identify the people who are energized by the crisis, then tap them on the shoulder and use them, and be completely transparent about what your goals and objectives are. Let them know, and you will be surprised at what you can accomplish in this.
Edward, can I make one other comment on the
Yeah,
revenue side? So
please.
one of the other things we've learned that's been pretty cool is that many of the trade organizations or groups, CEO networking groups within sectors have done a pretty good job of, and maybe there's an economist or someone from a college involved, from coming up with some sort of assumption for their recovery curve. So we can talk about broadly, a recovery curve, meaning the V, the U, the depth and duration of what this dip looks like. Those are very sort of coarse measurements around GDP and consumer behavior. With more energy, a decent economist or someone similar can go deeper into a sector or a subvertical. So if you have trade organizations or networking groups of CEOs or CXOs, stay close to them because they're probably developing at least some thinking for what that looks like. And again, talking about, starting with some sort of plan, bake that in, look at that recovery and make that sort of model your revenue and act accordingly, right? If the revenue's up, you'll need working capital for that reason. If it's down, you'll have other problems, but at least you'll have a starting point to fall back to, right? You gotta start somewhere. And Edward, I'll say one other thing about telling your story. I'm like Steve Jobs. One more thing. This is not the time to skimp. If you're in the position of needing to dust off a 409A, this may not be the time to skimp on a free or near free 409A. We're seeing those work papers become distressed with further scrutiny. So I know that's tricky to think about, but that is an important part of telling your story and about your emergence. So don't think about that.
I specifically I'll say something on that. The valuation team is one of the groups that reports up to me, and they have been they've been pounded by crummy 409As that are not responding to the issues that people are really facing. It makes sense to invest the time and energy and some dollars in getting this done right. There was a question that it came just right this second. What's a 409A? Tell them, Terry.
Really simply, it's a valuation exercise that helps you understand. And by the way, it can be used as a non-cash comp tool as well. So you might consider that as well as you look towards liquidity. It's a valuation for the purposes of talking to the market and allocating share value for yourself and folks in the business.
Yep.
Among others.
So a question comes. If you've got a bank line, should you draw down the entire amount? If a bank freezes availability, you might have a problem. Is that a good way to prepare for long-term revenue issues? Brett, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think most bank loans are probably going to be tied to some sort of business metrics behind the scenes, and so even if you do that, there's likely to be a call, and you may get yourself into bigger trouble than you want to be in. Obviously, every loan has different requirements, and so what you want to do in any individual situation would need to be evaluated. But I would be hesitant to use that as my first strategy, of pulling that down. I mean, there is likely to be, to Terry's point, some tightening up. And so, you want to be staying close to your bank, but just pulling everything on a line, probably isn't going to help you out that much in the short term anyways, and may get you into bigger problems in the long term.
Yeah, and that's going to look very different from bank to bank. SVB does put big, gnarly hooks into things, and you want to read those term sheets. So understand that. Look, these banks want to work with you too. They're going to be under distress as well. So I think an open, honest conversation with both the RM and someone in credit to understand what's happening is going to be good.
Terry's point is very well taken. I'm a little bit more aggressive than these younger guys, and My attitude is if you have the line, you have it for a reason, and the bank gave it to you for a reason. And so it's yours to use. However, I might call them and say, hey, look, you know, I'm concerned and I have the right to draw this down. You know, how do you guys feel about that? And engage them in that conversation. You know, the notion of transparency and documentation, guys. You can't be too transparent during these days. Let people know what's going on. Be transparent with employees, be transparent with creditors, be transparent with potential investors, and document the hell out of everything you're doing. If you've got a PPP, obviously, you need to be documenting that carefully so you can get forgiveness. But every conversation with a lender, every conversation with an investor, document it.
And that with employees as well. You should document all your COVID related issues that arise with employees, and document. Can I add a final thought around COVID specific?
You have to, please.
Okay, thank you. I want to just say that it's such an interesting time with not only do we need to honor people and allow people to be clear about what's happening with them, but we are in a very unique time where we have to think about public health from our employee perspective and protecting all of our employees. That is now our responsibility as a business owner. And that's very unique, right? That's a whole new dynamic. Not only are you dealing with your business from a financial standpoint and longevity standpoint, but now you're in the public health business. And so to keep that in the forefront of your mind in terms of being as absolutely proactive and planning for every potential scenario becomes so key, because employees have to feel safe. And unfortunately, if somebody does get sick, you're going to become even more engaged in that public health issue and need to do some contact tracing and figure out when somebody was exposed to somebody else and make sure that that communication and that transparency happens in order to allow people to be safe for themselves and protect themselves, and for you to protect the rest of the employees in your organization.
Good. We have time for another question or two. Any specific, I will ask, any specific PPP forgiveness type questions or details about that, we'd be happy to answer. All right. Then panel, any final words? Okay. I think we're a wrap then. Very, very good. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Nicola. It's fun.
Edward, thank you. Thank you to this amazing panel. These are hard conversations, and I think a lot of the engagement that we're getting from our attendees today is almost digesting it, trying to figure out, now how do I apply these words of wisdoms? You know, a couple of thoughts from my side, and just hearing such strong sentiment from the panel today on the importance of realizing there are systems, there are steps that can be taken to lower the anxiety level and to start feeling that there is actually more you can control than it may feel like it's overwhelming in this moment. So really appreciated the thoughtfulness to prioritizing one's team, one's health, the overall health of the business, and taking proactive steps in order to fight to the next day. Obviously, not to paint too rosy a picture, we know how hard it is in this moment to be able to really do all of that and still be struggling as humans in this moment. But truly appreciate this, and grateful for being able to share this presentation with everybody after the fact too. So to our amazing attendees who've joined us Thank you so much. It really has been an honor to be able to serve and support you this way. Again, our thanks and appreciation to our sponsors who underwrite all of this. We have one ask. As you know, all of this education is underwritten by our sponsors. We charge for nothing. We take no equity, but we do have a favor. Your feedback helps us get better. So into the chat window right now, you're going to see a feedback link. Please do take just a moment to complete that for us. Again, this is a great indication where we can understand what more do you need from us. What other resources do you wish you had access to, perhaps beyond just the revenue or the finance piece that we can deliver right now? But what other education, what other tips and strategies can we bring to bear to help you make it through to the next day? Upcoming, we've got some tremendous programs. We've got a great go-to-market strategy with Microsoft, a tremendous leader there, Shalu, who is well regarded in the space of helping social entrepreneurs really cross over into getting mainstream revenue for their companies. She's going to be available to support us, and that's coming up on June 9th. And then on June 11th, we have one of our much beloved programs, our Author in Residence series. This time it's going to be featuring Kay Wright, and you'll see a link to that in the chat window as well. So if you haven't registered for that one yet and would like to, please do so. Our best wishes to all of you. Take good care of yourselves, your families, your loved ones, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you.